Young millionaire sought cure in 50 countries. Only a black florist could help. And no one knows how when Ethan Cross collapsed at the entrance to the small flower shop Bloom and Grace in Portland, Oregon, the red roses he had bought for his latest doctor's appointment scattered across the rain-soaked floor. At 28, the CEO of Cross Technologies had exhausted every medical option known to mankind, from the most renowned neurologists at Johns Hopkins to traditional healers in Tibet, but no one had been able to explain or cure the condition that was slowly killing him. What Ethan didn't expect was that salvation would come from the calloused hands of Jasmine Williams, a 26-year-old florist who worked 12-hour days to support her sick grandmother and pay her own college tuition for botany. When she saw him staggering among the flowers, his pale face contorted in pain, Jasmine didn't see a young billionaire whose $800 million fortune had been built through revolutionary apps. She saw only a human being in pain. The pain coursing through Ethan's body at that moment was unlike anything he had experienced in the past 18 months. It was as if thousands of electric needles were simultaneously piercing every nerve, every muscle, every bone. Specialists on 3 continents had tried to name his condition: degenerative neurological syndrome, atypical fibromyalgia, rare autoimmune disorder, but all the diagnoses were just fancy words for "we don't know what you have or how to treat it." Jasmine put down the arrangement of lilies she was working on and approached cautiously, her hands still damp from the water. "Hey, are you okay? Do you want me to call an ambulance?" Her voice carried the genuine kindness of someone who had spent her life caring for fragile things. Delicate flowers, a grandmother with Alzheimer's, dreams that always seemed out of reach. What Jasmine didn't know was that her hands carried something that no million-dollar piece of medical equipment could detect, a gift that had first manifested when she was 8 years old, saving an injured bird in her backyard. For 18 years, she had carefully hidden this ability, using it only on dying plants and abandoned animals, afraid that someone would discover it and label her crazy. Ethan tried to steady himself on the rough wooden counter, but his legs gave way completely. That's when Jasmine did something instinctive. She reached out and touched his shoulder gently, as she would any wounded creature that crossed her path. What happened in the next few seconds defied every law of modern medicine Ethan had studied obsessively during months of despair. A gentle warmth spread from the spot where Jasmine's hand touched his shoulder, coursing through his body like waves of relief he hadn't felt in over a year. The excruciating pain that had been his constant companion simply disappeared. It didn't gradually subside or get masked by painkillers. It evaporated completely, as if it had never existed. Ethan stood up slowly, testing each movement with disbelief. For the first time in 18 months, he could move without pain, breathe without effort, think without the constant fog that chronic pain had created in his mind. How did you do that?" he murmured, his voice heavy with a mixture of gratitude and utter confusion. Jasmine quickly withdrew her hand, as if she had touched something dangerous. There was something in her eyes that Ethan recognized: fear. Not fear of him, but fear of herself, of what had just happened. "I didn't do anything," she whispered, backing toward the back of the shop. It was just a coincidence. The pain will come back." What Ethan couldn't understand was why a simple Portland florist would be terrified for relieving his pain. There was something in Jasmine's reaction that suggested this wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and that the consequences of her gift weren't all blessings. Ethan took out his wallet, removing a business card and $500 bills. "I'm Ethan Cross, CEO of Cross Technologies. Over the past 18 months, I've spent over $3 million consulting with the best doctors in the world. None of them could give me 5 seconds of relief. You just did something they swore was impossible." Jasmine looked at the money and then at the business card, immediately recognizing the name. Cross Technologies was one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the country, and Ethan Cross regularly appeared on the covers of magazines such as Forbes and Fortune. "I don't want your money," she said softly, pushing the bills back at him. "And I can't explain what happened because I don't understand it myself." The sincerity in her voice convinced Ethan that she wasn't trying to exploit him or con him out of money. There was something genuinely frightening to her about what had just happened. "Jasmine," he read the name on her name tag, "I don't know what you have, but I need to understand. You may have given me back my life." As he spoke, Ethan noticed something that made him pause. Jasmine looked slightly paler than when he had entered the store, and there was a subtle fatigue in her eyes that hadn't been there moments before. It was as if healing his pain had cost her something she didn't even fully understand herself. If you're enjoying this story about unexplained mysteries and connections that defy science, subscribe to the channel right now, Because what Jasmine revealed about the terrible price of her gift and why she feared using this ability will show you that some miracles come with consequences that can destroy those who perform them. The silence in the small flower shop was broken only by the soft sound of Oregon rain hitting the glass windows. Jasmine continued to nervously arrange the flowers, avoiding Ethan's piercing gaze as he stood in the same spot where he had experienced what could only be described as a medical miracle. The difference in how he felt was so dramatic it was unsettling. 18 months of constant agony simply eradicated in seconds. "Jasmine," Ethan said softly, approaching the counter where she worked with mechanical movements. "I know this may sound crazy, but you just did something that neurologists at Harvard Medical School have sworn is impossible. I need to understand how." His voice carried not only curiosity, but a desperate need to understand if this had been a one-time event or if there was some logical explanation. Jasmine finally stopped cutting the flower stems and looked directly at him, her hands trembling slightly. "Do you want to know the truth? I shouldn't have touched you. I've made this mistake before." Tears began to form in her eyes as she struggled with painful memories. "When I was 15, my best friend was dying of leukemia. I touched her trying to do what I just did to you." Ethan felt his stomach clench when he saw the devastated expression on her face. "What happened?" Jasmine wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving small drops of water from the flowers on her face. "She got better. Completely. The doctors said it was a miracle, an impossible spontaneous remission. But her voice faltered for a moment. "I got sick. Really sick. I spent 3 months in the hospital, and the doctors never could explain why." The revelation hit Ethan like a bolt of lightning. Jasmine's gift wasn't a free blessing, it was a transfer, an exchange where she absorbed the pain and illness of others into her own body. That explained why she seemed weaker after touching him, why there was so much fear in her eyes when she realized what she had done instinctively. "That's why you work with flowers," Ethan understood slowly. "You can use your gift on plants without the same cost." Jasmine nodded, a tear rolling down her cheek. "Dead plants don't affect me the same way. I can bring them back to life with almost no consequences. But with people it's different. It's like I absorb not only their pain, but part of their life." Ethan watched her carefully, noticing the subtle signs he had missed before, the increasing paleness, the way she leaned on the counter as if she needed support, the fatigue that was settling into her eyes. "You're feeling my pain now, aren't you?" Jasmine tried to deny it, but her expression betrayed her. It's weaker when the person is around. But it'll get worse when you're gone." The guilt Ethan felt was overwhelming. For 18 months, he had prayed for any relief, any solution to his suffering. Now, to discover that his cure had been bought with the well-being of an innocent young woman who had only tried to help him made him feel like the worst kind of predator. "Jasmine, I can't accept this. I can't let you suffer because of me." "You don't understand," Jasmine said, her voice taking on a tone of resignation. "It's too late. The process began the moment I touched you. Even if you don't want it, even if I regret it, what has been transferred cannot be returned. I will carry your pain for the next few months, maybe years." Ethan felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. "Is there any way to reverse this? Any way for me to take back what is mine?" Jasmine shook her head sadly. "I've spent years studying this, reading everything I could find about energy healing, disease transfer, alternative medicine. I've never found a way to reverse the process." The sound of rain intensified, creating a curtain of isolation around the small shop. Ethan looked around, noticing for the first time the details of his surroundings. It was a modest place, but carefully organized, filled with lush plants that clearly received expert care. "Why did you open a flower shop? Why didn't you become a doctor, or a therapist, or something related to healing?" "Because I don't want to heal people," Jasmine replied with brutal honesty. "I want to live my own life without carrying the weight of others' illnesses. Working with plants allows me to use my gift in a safe way. I can bring beauty into the world without destroying myself in the process." Ethan then understood the extent of the sacrifice she had made for him. Not only had she eased his pain, but she had violated her own principles, broken the rules she had set to protect herself. "Jasmine, I have resources, connections, access to the best researchers in the world. There must be some way to study your gift, to understand how it works, maybe find a way to use it without harming you." Jasmine looked at him with an expression of skepticism mixed with a small spark of hope. Do you really believe that science can explain something that defies all known laws of biology? Ethan moved closer, his voice laden with determination. I believe that if there are people like you in the world, then there are answers we haven't yet discovered. And if there's anyone with the resources to find those answers, it's me. For a moment, the fear in Jasmine's eyes was replaced by something different: curiosity, maybe even hope. What if there are no answers? What if your gift is simply supernatural? Ethan smiled for the first time since he had entered the store. Then we'll redefine what we consider possible. Over the next few days, Ethan canceled all of his company meetings and devoted himself entirely to researching the phenomenon he had experienced. He discreetly hired a team of researchers from Oregon Health and Science University, offering substantial funding for studies on anomalies in biological energy transfer, without specifically mentioning Jasmine's case. Meanwhile, he visited the flower shop daily, not only to check on her, but because he found that her close presence minimized the suffering she had absorbed. Jasmine, meanwhile, struggled with pain that was strangely familiar, exactly the same as that which had tortured Ethan for 18 months. During the first few nights after the incident, she could barely sleep, experiencing the same sensations of electric needles running through her nervous system. But there was something different this time. When Ethan was nearby, talking to her while she tended to the flowers, the pain subsided significantly. On the fourth morning, Jasmine made a terrifying discovery. While watering the orchids, her vision began to blur and she collapsed, knocking over the watering can and spilling water all over the shop floor. Ethan, who had arrived minutes earlier, rushed to help her, and the moment their hands touched again, he felt a devastating wave, not just his original pain returning, but amplified, as if it had fermented and grown during the days he had been away from her body. It's working backwards, Jasmine whispered, leaning on him to get up. When you touch me, your pain comes back to you, but worse. It's like my body has intensified it. Ethan held her arms tightly, ignoring the agony growing in his own body. Then we have an impossible choice. Either I suffer or you suffer, but we can't both be okay at the same time. It was that afternoon, as they shared the weight of the pain literally between them, that Jasmine finally told Ethan the true origin of her gift. My great-grandmother was a healer in Louisiana, descended from slaves who preserved ancient African knowledge of energy medicine. She said that some women in the family were born with the ability to carry the pain of others, but that it always came at a terrible price. Ethan listened, fascinated, as Jasmine revealed a family lineage of women who had used their gifts to help needy communities, always in secret, always paying a devastating personal cost. My great-grandmother died at 45, my grandmother at 50. They both spent their lives healing others until their own bodies couldn't take it anymore. That's why I moved to Portland, to escape that legacy. But you couldn't escape, Ethan observed, understanding the depth of her dilemma. The gift is in you, wanting to be used, even when you resist. Jasmine nodded sadly. It's like a constant thirst. Whenever I see someone suffering, my body reacts instinctively. I have to consciously force myself not to touch, not to help. That night, in his apartment in the Pearl District, Ethan did something he had never done in his meteoric career. He called his board of directors and announced that he would be stepping away from the company's operations temporarily to deal with urgent personal medical issues. The truth was that he had found something more important than expanding his tech empire, finding a way to free Jasmine from the curse she had inherited. Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Jasmine developed a strange but functional routine. They took turns carrying the pain, spending a few hours together to transfer it back to him, allowing her to rest, then separating so she could recover before the next shift. It was an exhausting existence for both of them, but it created a forced intimacy that neither had experienced before. You know what's ironic? Jasmine said one afternoon as she arranged peonies that had revived under her touch. Before I met you, I felt constantly alone, even surrounded by plants that respond to my care. Now, sharing this terrible pain with you, I feel more connected to another human being than I ever have. Ethan understood exactly what she meant. His life had been a series of superficial relationships with people who were interested in his wealth or status. Jasmine, I have a confession. For the last 18 months before I met you, I prayed every day that anyone, could truly understand what I was going through. I never imagined that understanding would come in such a literal form. It was at that moment that they both realized that something fundamental had changed between them. It was no longer just about the physical pain they shared, but about an emotional connection that had grown through their mutual suffering. Ethan had found someone who saw him beyond his wealth, and Jasmine had found someone willing to carry her burden without judgment. 3 months after their first meeting at the flower shop, Ethan had completely transformed his approach to solving the dilemma he and Jasmine faced. Using his virtually unlimited resources, he had quietly set up a private research laboratory in the basement of a building in downtown Portland, equipped with state-of-the-art technology to study bioenergetic phenomena. The team included quantum physicists, neurologists specializing in chronic pain, and even anthropologists who studied ancient healing practices. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a Stanford neuroscientist who had agreed to lead the project, was fascinated when Ethan finally revealed the true nature of the research. "What you're describing defies everything we know about neural energy transfer," she said after discreetly observing one of the switching sessions between Ethan and Jasmine. "But the brain activity patterns we're detecting are unmistakable. Something is actually being transferred between you." The real breakthrough came when Dr. Rodriguez discovered that the phenomenon was not purely mystical, but had an identifiable neurological basis. "Jasmine, your nervous system naturally produces a specific electromagnetic frequency that resonates with patterns of neurological pain. It's as if you're a biological tuning fork calibrated to absorb and redistribute painful impulses." Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in her life, someone had scientifically explained what she was. Ethan held her hand as Dr. Rodriguez continued explaining. "The most fascinating thing is that this ability seems to have a real genetic basis, possibly an adaptive mutation that developed in family lines exposed to extreme trauma for generations." The connection to Jasmine's family history, slavery, community suffering, the need for healing, suddenly made evolutionary sense. But the most shocking discovery came when Dr. Rodriguez revealed that he had found a potential way to calibrate Jasmine's gift. "Using precise electromagnetic stimulation, we can theoretically teach your nervous system to filter the pain it absorbs, processing it and dissipating it rather than storing it." It was a solution neither of them had dared to imagine, not eliminating the gift, but making it safe. The experimental process was intense and risky. For 2 weeks, Jasmine spent hours connected to equipment that mapped every neural impulse, every bioelectric fluctuation of her unique nervous system. Ethan remained by her side during each session, serving as a test subject to verify that the modifications were working. Slowly, miraculously, the pattern began to change. In the decisive session, when Jasmine touched Ethan for the first time with her recalibrated nervous system, something extraordinary happened. His pain didn't just disappear, it was literally dissipated, transformed into energy that his body processed and released harmlessly. For the first time, Jasmine had healed someone without absorbing their suffering. "How do you feel?" Ethan asked, watching her carefully for any signs of fatigue or pain. Jasmine smiled with a freedom he had never seen before. "I feel whole. Like I can finally use my gift the way it was always meant to be used." Dr. Rodriguez monitored both of them, confirming that no pain transfer had occurred. But the most profound transformation wasn't technical, it was emotional. During the months working together, literally sharing each other's pain, Ethan and Jasmine had developed an intimacy that transcended any relationship either of them had ever experienced before. "Jasmine," Ethan said that night after they left the lab, "I know this started because I needed healing, but now I can't imagine my life without you." Jasmine stopped in the middle of the Burnside Bridge, the Willamette River reflecting the city lights below them. "Ethan, are you sure you're not confusing gratitude with love? You don't owe me anything. Your company funded the research that set me free." Ethan held her hands, looking directly into her eyes. "Jasmine, I spent 18 months believing I was dying. You didn't just save me, you taught me what it means to truly live." The characteristic Portland rain began to fall softly, but neither of them moved. "There's something I never told you," Jasmine confessed. "During all those moments when we shared the pain, when our nervous systems were connected, I could feel not only your physical pain, but your emotions, your fears, your dreams. I got to know you in a way that no one has ever known another person." Ethan understood that what they had shared went far beyond a medical solution. They had literally shared consciousness, experienced empathy on an impossible neurological level. "So you know," he said softly, "that when I say I love you, it's not out of gratitude. It's because I know your soul, and it's the most beautiful I've ever encountered." The kiss they shared on the bridge, under the Portland rain, sealed not only a romantic relationship, but a partnership that would change the lives of thousands of people. Because now, with Jasmine's gift finally secure and understood, they had the opportunity to turn personal discovery into a global medical revolution. A year after that transformative afternoon at the flower shop, Ethan and Jasmine opened the Williams Cross Center for Bioenergetic Medicine in Portland, a revolutionary complex that combined cutting-edge technology with ancient healing practices. The center had become the first institute in the world dedicated exclusively to the study and safe application of natural healing gifts, attracting both skeptical scientists and people with unexplained abilities from all over the planet. Jasmine, now the center's medical director, had trained a team of 12 people with variations of her gift, individuals who had previously lived in hiding, afraid of their own abilities. Using the neural recalibration protocol developed by Dr. Rodriguez, each of them learned to channel their gifts without sacrificing their own health. What excites me the most, Jasmine said during an interview with the New York Times, is seeing people who have spent their entire lives feeling like freaks discover that they are, in fact, the next evolution of medicine. The most significant morning came when they brought in the center's first official patient, an 8-year-old child with juvenile fibromyalgia who had exhausted all traditional medical options. When Jasmine gently touched the girl's forehead and watched the pain disappear from her eyes without feeling any transfer of suffering, she realized that they had truly revolutionized not only their own lives, but the future of medicine. Ethan, who had sold 60% of his shares in Cross Technologies to finance the center, discovered a satisfaction that his business achievements had never provided. For years, I created algorithms that made people's lives easier digitally, he explained during the TED Talk that went viral. But working alongside Jasmine taught me that the most powerful technology isn't in computers, it's in the human capacity to truly heal one another. The center had treated more than 3,000 patients in its first year, documenting success rates that left the traditional medical community initially skeptical, then fascinated. Prestigious medical universities began sending residents for internships, recognizing that a new frontier in medicine had been opened. What had begun as a desperate solution to one person's suffering had become a revolution that would benefit generations. But the most profound transformation was personal. On the eve of their first anniversary, Ethan took Jasmine back to the small flower shop where it all began. The place now served as a kind of personal museum. She had kept the space exactly as it was on that first day, including the dried red roses he had knocked over when he stumbled in. "You know what's most amazing about our story?" Jasmine asked, gently touching the preserved petals. "We both spent years hiding, you from your pain, me from my gift. It wasn't until we stopped fighting who we really were that we found not only healing, but each other." Ethan knelt among the same flowers where he had collapsed a year earlier, now holding a ring that had been specially designed for her, an emerald surrounded by small diamonds that formed the pattern of the neural waves that Dr. Rodriguez had mapped during her first healing sessions. "Jasmine Williams, you didn't just heal my pain. You taught me that the greatest wealth is not what we accumulate, but what we share." When she said yes, through tears and laughter, they both understood that they had proven something revolutionary, that true healing does not happen when we eliminate suffering, but when we find someone willing to carry it with us until we discover together a way to transform it into something beautiful. 2 years after the wedding, the Williams Cross Center model had been replicated in 15 countries. The global bioenergetic medicine network they created was training a new generation of health professionals who combined rigorous science with respect for human abilities that traditional medicine had ignored for centuries. Most importantly, they had created a legacy that transcended their own personal stories. Young people with inexplicable gifts no longer had to hide or suffer alone. Patients with incurable conditions had new options for hope. And medical science had expanded its boundaries to include possibilities that had previously been considered impossible. In the final scene of this extraordinary story, Ethan and Jasmine walked hand in hand through the therapeutic garden they had created behind the center, where patients and healers worked together cultivating plants that bloomed under Jasmine's special touch. "Sometimes I still can't believe it all started with you stumbling into my shop," she said, laughing. "I didn't stumble," Ethan corrected with a smile. "I was guided. Through 50 countries, 100 doctors, 1,000 failed attempts, until I found exactly what I needed, not just healing, but purpose, partnership, and true love." If this story of inexplicable transformation and love that defies science has touched your heart, if you believe that there are still mysteries in the world worth exploring, and that sometimes the answers we seek are found in the most unlikely people, subscribe to the channel right now and share your own experience with unexplained healings or connections that changed your life in the comments. Because the greatest lesson in this story is that when we stop fighting who we really are and find someone willing to accept us completely, we discover that the deepest healing is not in eliminating our pain, but in transforming it into wisdom, compassion, and the ability to alleviate the suffering of others.